Day started right. From our shack to yours, this is Coffee and Ham Radios. We are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well.
Jim, you're not going to hit the button?
You're not hitting the button, Jim?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are
I have a headache.
live.
Like I'm playing cards with my brother's
well,
kids here.
Don't talk to it either.
the new guy down in the corner there kind of threw me off because I didn't know who he was. I thought we were getting the Telemundo girl. I'm just saying.
No, that's your
We
replacement.
got 6 spots. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we need
part.
one more.
I was like, who is this guy? I don't know him.
Good morning,
I've had
everybody.
problems.
Welcome to Coffee and
We
Ham
all
Radios.
know
This
that.
is our Saturday show, and usually we try to do a little bit higher production value, but somebody ruined that way over there.
I did totally.
He even practiced before the show started, made sure we could all hear it and everything, and then just totally forgot his cue.
I know.
I'm
Playing
old.
cards with
It
my
happens.
brother's kids.
What the heck?
Right.
So today we have a question that has plagued all of our minds, kept us up at night, caused dissent at the dinner table with the family. My wife and I haven't talked for weeks after going through this argument. It's really been a problem.
Tell me how you do that. I need to know.
How you get the peace and quiet of not having your wife talk to you? Right.
That's not happening.
Talk about ham radio at the dinner table. That does
Right.
it every single time. So what we're going to talk about today is what they call type acceptance, which is kind of this weird concept of I have this radio that can do radio stuff, but the government says it can't because reasons. I guess that's kind of what they call fiat. The government just declares it as so, and so therefore we must all accept. But an example of this is you can't take a GMRS radio with a removable antenna and a keypad and use it on FRS because it has a removable antenna and a keypad, and those things are verboten on FRS frequencies. And so we brought Tony DeWitt here, and he's going to tell us all about his background so we know that he speaks from a position of knowledge and empowerment and authority. And then we're going to dive deep on this topic. Tony, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. If you want the long and short on the background, I was a military brat, graduated from high school in the Philippines, spent 6 years in the military, became a respiratory therapist, decided after 13 years I didn't want to do that any longer, and I went to law school. Since then, I have worked in at least 2 firms doing originally doing medical negligence work, and now I mostly do appellate work and federal.
That's a big word.
Yeah, I do appeals basically.
I had an appellate gun when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too.
But that's
Shake
me
my
in a
head.
nutshell.
Okay, excellent.
That's the elevator speech.
Yeah,
What's,
so there
what
are
branch were you in? I think
Army.
you told Army. Okay.
Yeah, I was
Very good.
At the end, I was a combat medic. I started out as a 71 Lima, paper pusher, and then went over to combat medic. It was much more fun.
Yes, it is.
Wait, so you were younger when you were in the Philippines? Is that what you were saying?
I graduated from high school over there.
Wow.
My dad was in the Air Force, and we were at Clark Air Base in the Philippines, and I graduated from Wagner High School, which no
It's
longer.
a interesting place over there. I've been a few times. It's weird because it's got this crazy Americanized culture where they really seem to align or identify their culture with Americans. But,
you speak
it's-
very highly of your time in the Philippines, Abe.
I had a lot of fun over there.
Must have been when you were coming of age.
No, I was like 30s, 40s. I don't know. I'd have to look at the calendar.
What are you now?
Sure.
80s?
Yeah, I'm getting
Philippines
there.
was an interesting society. When I was over there, Marcos was still in control, and they had a different concept. You know how in the United States, a lot of times you'll hear the cops yell, "Halt or I'll shoot." In the Philippines, bang, bang, halt or I'll shoot again.
Well, the guy that they have in charge over there now, he's definitely a little bit more on that extreme end.
Yeah.
I lived in Turkey for a little while. My dad was Navy, and I don't remember a lot about it because I was really young, but I do remember going down the street one day, and they pulled some guy that was stealing out of one of the stores and just beating him right on the street right there. It was
I
like
gotta say that would probably solve a lot of problems if there were beatings administered in place.
in place, yeah.
Yeah, I ain't gonna do that. Look what happened
My
to
mom
him.
goes, I don't remember that. I go, I don't know why I remember that.
His wife was the one that had like more shoes than my wife, although
And they'll-
mine is a close second.
Mm-hmm.
She had like 9,000 pairs of shoes or something.
That was a long time ago.
And somebody said, Lionel said that was a colony. I don't think that was a colony, not a United States.
Yeah, it
What's
was
that?
a colony.
Yeah.
I thought it was like
after the Spanish-American War.
Okay.
And
Did we take it from
after we
Spain?
got it, there was a Philippine insurrection in 1918. That's where the .45 caliber handgun was first used.
Okay.
It had better stopping power.
Ooh.
But 9s are better anyway. So
The
we'll
argument
just move on
begins.
from that. We'll just
The
move on
holy
from that.
holy wars.
I mean, he threw down the gauntlet right there, just right there.
On the 8th day, God created the 45 auto.
I mean, in 1918, it was high tech. 2022.
The only reason you get a 45 is because they don't have a 46.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I, I don't understand the whole 9 is better concept, but
Force
Well, so that's
equals
something-
mass times velocity squared, you wretched hillbilly.
That's something else that Tony does. If you guys kindly check out the description, you can get some information on Tony's background. Tony is a published author. He writes for Concealed Carry magazine, so we kind of went straight into the 2A franchise there.
Yeah.
So if you want to know anything about that, you can talk to Tony, and he will set you straight. So, Tony, I've read a couple of your articles. Fantastic stuff.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, 50 AE, that'll do it.
Yeah.
Properly used, there won't even be DNA. Excellent. So Joe Brett said we should get back on topic and stop talking about pew-pews. I'm like, well, why?
he ain't the boss of me.
That's right. He ain't my
You
real
tell
dad.
him. Keep
He
going.
ain't my real dad.
Keep going, Abe.
He's your daddy, though? Is that what you're saying?
He ain't my real dad.
He's the dad you chose, not the dad you were born with.
It's the dad I deserved.
Right. Are we going somewhere with this, boys?
No,
No, we're
please,
supposed to be
for
talking-
the love
we're
of
talking about-
God, please pick up the topic.
We're talking about compliance or something, weren't we?
Type
Yeah, we are.
acceptance.
We are. So in my thumbnail,
Title.
I have an ICOM 705, which is one of those all band, all mode radios. But when you turn it on and you tune to a frequency like 462.5 something, whatever GMRS happens to be that day, it won't transmit. And there's a modification you can do. You can open up the case of that radio and remove a thing here and put a thing there, remove another thing that you put in that you shouldn't have put in, and all of a sudden it'll transmit anywhere you spin that dial. So how does that look? How does the law look upon that?
Well, I'm pretty sure the FCC takes dim view of it. Normally, the type acceptance issues are handled with the manufacturer, and I don't think anybody's going out and inspecting radios unless somebody gets a complaint filed against them. But generally speaking, the things that come up under the Enforcement Bureau for type acceptance issues are like what happened to Hobby King, where they were selling a radio that they just completely neglected to send to the FCC for type acceptance, and they wound up getting a huge fine out of it. It basically, from what I understand, shut the company down. But that's how they typically go after type acceptance. Now, it's always been okay for hams to build their own radios, and still can. But if you build it, you have to you should only use it on the bands where you have privileges, obviously.
Okay.
And-
Yeah.
But you don't have to send it in, right?
No,
No.
you don't have to get type
I knew that.
acceptance for a radio that you build for yourself. But if you start building them for other people, then yeah, you would have to do that.
That
But
sounds a lot like a
that's
gun
if
law,
you
I know.
build for a radio for amateur radio spectrum, right? Not you can't being a ham. You can't build an FRS radio, or you can't build a GMRS radio, right?
I don't think you can. No. If your intent is to transmit on those frequencies, then I think you're pretty much limited to purchasing what's out there. And there is a channel out there that refers to the FCC regulations as rules and not laws, and that's incorrect. Anytime you have a regulation that's published subject to a federal statute, it has the force of law. And violation of the FCC rules, in many cases, can lead to criminal prosecution. It's not frequent, and the FCC doesn't make a big deal of it, but normally they just hit you with a fine if they're really ticked off. Most of the time, they just send you a warning letter.
A cease and desist kind of thing.
Yeah.
I am trying to find it, Anthony, and you may know this article. I just saw this yesterday or the day
Oh.
before. And I think it was with the ARRL and the FCC going back and forth, was that if you have a radio that is not type accepted for GMRS, even as a ham, I'm using GMRS as an example, or FRS, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's illegal for you to use the radio, period. If it's being, I'm trying to find this article. It's illegal to use, basically, even if you are a ham.
You mean on the other frequencies?
Yes, if it's supposed to be type accepted for, I might have not said that right. If it's supposed to be type accepted for Part 95, and you're not supposed to be able to use it on non-Part 95 frequencies, something like that. I'm trying to find the article because I don't remember the details.
Well, ham is Part 97, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can.
I think is GMRS.
Yeah, as a ham, and Tony mentioned this earlier. As a ham, you're allowed to take any radio, like even an old police radio, and modify it so that it is legal to transmit on your bands that you have access to. So if I got an 800 megahertz radio and modified it for 900 megahertz, hams have access to 900 megahertz. I can use that on 900 megahertz. I cannot use it on 800 megahertz, is what he was saying earlier.
Right.
Okay.
The only situation you can use that radio on 800 megahertz would be in an emergency situation if you had access to it. Like if you stop alongside the road and find a police officer who's been shot, you could use their radio to call for help, and nobody's going to have a problem with that.
That's an interesting scenario. So the way that I read that law was, and I saw some casework on this also, is there has to be no other means of communication if you're not licensed and you want to use a radio frequency that you don't have access to. Like I can't have a cell phone in my hand and a radio that has fire frequencies programmed into it. I have to use the cell phone. But if there's a shot police officer on the side, first off, I guess they wouldn't complain anyway because it's, brotherhood kind of thing. But if there's a down police officer on the side of the road and you roll up on the scene as the first responder and you pick up their radio would probably be the best way to get in contact with them if you actually knew how to use it.
Right.
Yes,
but,
I think that's right. And I don't think you'd draw a complaint from the FCC if you did that.
Right.
And the reason I don't think you would draw the complaint is, as you pointed out, first of all, the cops aren't going to complain. And second of all, I've always taken the position that if you have to use some different part of the spectrum, that you have to do it in an emergency situation, that you do it boldly.
Yes.
Because the righteous are as bold as lions and the guilty flee. So if you have to use that radio, and there's a situation where a guy got hung up because he used the fire service radio out in, I think it was Oregon.
Yeah, that's
he used a fake name and a fake call sign, and that will get you in trouble every time. You get on there and you say, D0DQ, I have an emergency, I have a police officer shot, my location is, and use it for the minimum amount of time necessary to get the information out, and then, of course, I suspect Jim and I would then attend to the police officer and try to provide first aid.
Right.
But you got to get tertiary care going before you start the emergency care in that situation, I think.
Yeah, because there is some emergency care that, like, once started, you can't stop, like CPR as an example.
Yes.
But when you talk about like these guys, like the guy in Oregon or whatever was using the fake name and all that, like. Also, when something's an emergency and the police and the fire department are handling it, it doesn't mean that you show up with your bowfang and then start transmitting on those frequencies. Right. Because there was a guy who was
okay.
Right. There was a guy who was doing that as well who got in a little bit of trouble for that. And it's got to be a legitimate emergency if you do that kind of radio stuff. It's not like, oh, I've got a flat tire on the side of the beltway, or I got drunk at the bar and I couldn't drive home. That's not an emergency. It has to be where there is a risk of loss of life or property, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it has to be significant. You can't just worry about having lost your pack of lifesavers. It's got to be significant loss of life or property. And
I would say property is probably somewhat of a distant second on that, unless it's
It's like houses burning down kind of thing, right? It's
but that also has a life safety component too.
Yeah, this gets into my favorite legal word, reasonable. Somebody else has to also agree that in that same scenario, they would take the exact same action. And so a reasonable course of action when your house is burning down is to call for emergency on the most available means possible. And that's not 14652. That's also not your local repeater. You want to dial 911 in that case. And I guess Before we get too far, Ape reminded me of this yesterday, and I'm going to ask Tony to do the honors, but I think we need to give a disclaimer here because there are 5 people here, and only one of us is lawyers, and none of us are hired by you, as far as I know.
Yeah, I don't give legal advice on YouTube. I talk generally about the law, but I don't give legal advice. And the reason I don't is because I'm licensed only in the state of Missouri. I live in the state of Florida and in the state of Alabama. I have residences in both places, but I practice in Missouri. If that sounds stupid, welcome to the 21st century and to remote work.
Right.
Right.
That's the same with it's the same with my paramedic license. We don't have reciprocity across state lines, even though the national standard is the exact same.
Yes, and that's stupid.
Yes.
You know,
Kind of like concealed carry licenses as well.
Yeah. And, you know, in some states, they have interstate compacts, like Missouri and Illinois have an interstate compact where if you're transporting a patient from Quincy, Illinois down to St. Louis, Missouri, the paramedics who are in the ambulance can provide care during the trip down. But a lot of states, you have to hand them off at the border. And that is especially stupid. And nobody ever challenges that. But, I mean, that's what, if you actually apply the law, that's what it is.
There are a lot of laws out there that, if applied, we'd be extremely guilty, every single one of us. And thankfully, they're not applied. And it's the really bad part about that is, in order to remove a law, you have to enact a new law that supersedes the old law. So it's like we'll just double the amount of laws by getting rid of old laws.
And, you know, Charles Dickens once said, if that's what the law says, then the law is an ass. And I think that, you know, that's where it comes down. And it's the same thing in ham radio. I mean, basically what they're trying to do is keep the spectrum pure and reduce spurious admissions. But where the FCC tends to get involved in these situations where they do enforcement actions is based on complaints from hams. I've found one case where this gal just continually interrupted on a repeater and basically shut down a net because somebody used the wrong pronouns for her. And as a result of that, she wound up getting a notice of violation from the FCC, as she should have. But most of the time, it's because people do stupid things that they wind up in front of the FCC.
Now, so the one thing that Steve brought up earlier when he was talking about the 705 and taking out one component, that actually is legal, but for
if you have the
only,
license.
if you have a license. So it's not illegal to take that part out, I don't think.
No, you can do whatever you want.
You have to have a license for it, and you have to prove it.
Modifying a ham radio.
Right.
And
because that's the MERS thing. The MERS thing opens the whole radio, though, I think, right? And it does everything then.
And just to be pedantic, you're saying MERS, M-U-R-S, but it's actually MARS, M-A-R-S. They're actually two different radio systems.
Oh, MARS, right.
It's
Mars,
military and civil air patrol frequencies.
Mars.
Only just for the record. I'm not picking on you. So Tony, you shared some documents with me. Let's take a look at this one here, and it's even too small.
That's the one I have up, in fact, on my computer right now.
Perfect.
So this is a forfeiture order, and this is a case where the guy just was really dumb. I
know that guy,
but he was dumb.
Stan.
The guy who is on this notice of or forfeiture order had a notice of basically a notice of violation that was sent to him, and he also got a notice of apparent liability. That's what NAL stands for in this. And in that letter, he wrote back and said, well, yeah, I did this, but, other hams have just gotten a warning letter as a result. And so if you scroll down in this thing later on, it says, in August of 2014, Mr. Talassi received a written warning from the Commission for violating Section 97.119A, where he was advised if the operation reoccurred, it could be subject to a monetary forfeiture. So that defense did not work. If you get a notice of apparent liability, you need to get a lawyer involved because there are all kinds of issues that pop up. Not so much in this situation, but in situations where hams make a report. If a ham makes a report and records it and sends it into the FCC, a lot of times they'll take action. And if they do, there are all kinds of evidentiary issues that would come up because although the forfeiture order requires you to pay, they can't enforce it against you without going into district court and filing an enforcement action. And when they file the enforcement action, then the rules of evidence apply, and they have to establish all of the fundamental facts, the stuff that is set out there on number 2 there, background. They have to establish all that. And if if you're dealing with hams, well, none of them are experts, technically, probably have never been in front of a federal judge before, don't really know much about testifying. There are ways to defend these, and a good defense counsel could probably get you a better result. But the real trick is just never to get here. I mean, the guy got a warning, and he ignored it.
Right.
And when you ignore a warning, I'm sorry, I don't feel sorry for you.
Right.
So there's that. And there are a number of others. There are some warning letters that were sent out. The interesting thing is that the government seems to have had a pause between 2018 and 2022 on enforcement actions. I'm sure they sent out letters to people, but it must have been from the regional office and probably just requests for more information where they didn't take any action. But there was a period there of about 4 years where you can't find any enforcement action. So, they don't have a lot of manpower.
I know there's a ham north of me that went through all kinds of litigation for years. When I first became a ham, he was interrupting stuff, and just I don't remember all the particulars, but he was actually a lawyer also, so I think he was able to stall things for quite a while. But I think they finally just took his license. They actually did, and then he just kept using it anyhow.
Was that the guy on 7200?
I think I don't know.
There's a guy
it
in
wouldn't be your
California.
7200.
Yeah, there's a guy in California that was doing it on a repeater, right? Then he set up like a
They found that guy though. Yeah,
like a Go box or something that was constantly transmitting stuff.
Yeah, that was a different guy, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a question from Lawnmower here. What type of lawyer should you look for if you get a notice of apparent liability?
You want somebody who is familiar both with administrative law and trial work, and you probably want to go look if you can find an enforcement action where somebody defended it, and get the person who defended it, the last enforcement action, if you can find that information. But generally speaking, if you have a family lawyer or if you know a lawyer, you can call that lawyer and get a recommendation.
Get you started, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody called me and said, who would I recommend for Missouri, I would be happy to help somebody. But outside of Missouri, I would have to go into several tools like Westlaw and find somebody who has handled this kind of case before I could really help somebody out. Because navigating through the multiple pages of rules is not something you want to do if you don't have the ability to diagram and sort of take pains to make sure you're following the right pathway through the rules. And of course, trial work is very difficult, primarily because you have to know the rules of evidence and know what you can get admitted and know what you can keep out. And knowing what you can keep out is probably more important in this situation than knowing what you can get in.
Right. So Jason has a follow-up question on that one. I think you kind of answered it already. What type of attorney for ham-related issues? Call your family lawyer and then have them give you a referral or look up the case number.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are both good ways to do it. If you have a lawyer that you know and trust, go to them. And if you don't, then you could email me, and I would certainly be happy to try and help find you one. But I unless it's out of Missouri, I probably couldn't help. There is a way for me to help in, like, if somebody down here had a problem, I could apply for what's called pro hoc vice, and for the purposes of one case, be admitted in the federal court for that reason. But it's usually more advantageous to the client for me not to do that because I've got to pay a fee to do it.
Which then we have to pay.
Yeah, which then the client would have to pay. And
Right,
so,
right.
you know, I would be very, very reasonable about the fees.
Yeah.
You know, our firm charges $795 an hour for my time, but I have discounted that quite a bit for people that I like. So, you know, it's
Good to have friends. It's good to be nice to people.
It is good to be nice to people, and it's good to take good care of people when you can.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could probably tell you my favorite lawyer joke. I have, but you know, that's another one of those things. The reason lawyer jokes exist is because not everybody thinks the same way I do.
Exactly. So Don's got a question, and I kind of knew Don was going to be the one to ask this one first. At what point will it be more expensive to fight it than to pay it? And I think, you know, there's a couple of choices on the table for that one. One is if the cost of, I mean, this is the obvious answer. If the cost of fighting it is less than the cost of the fine, then, you know, contact your lawyer and see if he thinks that it's winnable. But the other one is it depends on the action that's going to be taken. If I pay the fine and lose my license and I still want to continue to operate and maintain my license, then I'm going to have no choice but to fight it. So what do you think, Tony?
I think that's right. But I think the key point here is the FCC does not traditionally come in and slap you with a forfeiture order. The first thing they'll do is they'll send you a notice of apparent liability. And that's where you have to go and defend it. And in that Oregon case, the guy admitted to one of the Forest Service supervisors out there that he had done this transmission. And then when the FCC sent their field agent out to talk to him, he talked to the field agent. And as a matter of course, you never want to have a conversation with any federal law enforcement officer for any reason about anything. And so you just say, I'm sorry, you're going to need to talk to my attorney. And that's
even if you don't have one at that moment.
Yeah, that's where you get the attorney involved. And the attorney will simply say, I'm sorry, my client's not talking to you. If you can make a case without talking to my client, you're more than welcome to do it. But otherwise, we're not interested in having a discussion with you. And you can do that because at least the last time I checked, the Constitution's still in place.
Right.
I've run into a couple of situations where, you know, we were taught that we were innocent until proven guilty, but it really seems like we're guilty until proven innocent. So
now, in this situation, sometimes you are. So.
And then Plasma Storm is saying, I wanted to let that one marinate a little bit. Can't you contact your local bar association to get a recommendation? I don't actually know the answer to this one.
Most bar associations have a lawyer referral service. And what they'll do is they will pick 3 lawyers who have checked the box on their bar admission form for areas in which they practice. So when you call the bar association and say, I need an attorney for a ham-related matter, you're liable to get somebody who defends pork producers because they're not going to know what ham radio is. And you have to know the keywords. You need somebody who practices trial law or administrative law, either one of those two. And then they can probably give you a better recommendation, but it's going to be one of 3, and there won't be any qualitative analysis of which of those 3 is the best lawyer for you. And so what you have to do in that situation is you call the lawyer and you say, have you handled a case like this before? Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the administrative law process and how this is handled? Have you ever worked in front of the FCC? A lot of lawyers have done work for big companies, like to get cell phone spectrum, for example, or to defend the small telecommunications companies, but most of them have not handled ham radio related stuff. But they know the regulations and they understand how to proceed through the regulations, and they'd be a good fit. So that's the key part of it. Yeah, you can get a bar association recommendation, but it's not going to be based on quality. It's going to be based on who's checked the boxes.
And they might have checked the box not even knowing what they were checking in this case. So, yeah, homework is definitely warranted here. Jason's got a question for us. Jason says, does the ARL maintain an avenue for assistance with legal issues? So can you call the ARRL and get a lawyer or a recommendation of a lawyer?
You might be able to get one from the ARRL. I don't know. I've never sought to answer that question, but I would think the ARRL, if anybody, would know who the best lawyers are in that area.
But if you seemed like you might be guilty and you were looking for a lawyer to get you out of jail free, I don't know if the ARRL, I can't speak for them, but I don't know if they would be inclined to help you, right? Like if you were creating interference on the local repeater maliciously and causing problems, and all these hams complained about you, and that's why you were getting in trouble and you needed a lawyer, I don't know if the FCC would help. I mean, the ARRL would help you in that case.
You know,
I mean, if you were in an HOA battle or something, I suspect they probably would.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that's legitimate.
Yeah. Not I was broadcasting porn on 7200 or something.
Right.
Or crazy old man stuff, whatever.
Well, if you committed the ultimate crime, like calling CQ on TAC 310, if you did that, and
Dead to me.
Yeah.
You deserve it, right?
right.
So Jason gave us a little clarification. He says he was talking more along the lines of accidental violation, like a misunderstanding. So they might be able to coach you on what that is and how to not do it in the future, for sure.
And they may have somebody that they could recommend as an attorney, you know, and I think that's good. Again, the problem is that, or I shouldn't say the problem. I think in most cases you don't have an accidental violation or a misunderstanding by the time the FCC gets involved, because generally they are only responding to complaints. They don't have roving bands of radio direction finding cars out there trying to suss out who might be violating spectrum rules. They don't have the manpower for that, and as a result, they only respond to complaints. And unless you've gotten and hopefully, if somebody was doing something based on a misunderstanding of the rules, people in the local ham club would go to that person and say, "Hey, look, maybe you don't realize what you're doing, but you've got to stop this." And that I think it's always better, I think, to try and handle it within the, sort of use a mafia term, handle it within the family, as opposed to go outside and get help from the FCC. Because, you might wind up bringing, something down on yourself that way.
Yeah. So this is kind of one of those things that we're exactly talking about here. All Things Radio K4YAG says, I know people personally that bought the FTDX10 from Yaesu just to talk on CB frequency for the 100 watts. And CB, as far as I know, is AM and 4 watts only. And then there's also like an FM and a sideband portion of it as well. But, 100 watts is definitely a lot larger than 4 watts.
Yes. And if they do that, they're gonna wind up getting complaints from people who are in the area that are CBers that don't want that, and more likely than not, they're going to get complaints from hams, because nobody just plays on. If you're going to violate the rules and you're going to do it openly like that, you're not going to stop with just disrupting the CB band.
If you're one kind of lawbreaker, you're probably all kinds of lawbreakers, I guess.
What are you saying? Just because I speed, I'm a ham scofflaw? I mean,
Yes.
I don't speed. If I sped, if I broke the law by speeding, I've never done that. But
Well, I think that that's
Joe
a pretty common thing, though. I've seen people do that with 7300s, G90s, and stuff like that, just to be able to get like the waterfall spectrum scope is a big thing for CBers. So that's a pretty common thing. But that is against the rules, though, right?
Yeah.
And I was reading yesterday to kind of get brought up to speed on the topic. There was a lady named Laura Smith. This was when they did the Baofeng ban of 2018, and they were saying that if you have a radio like a Baofeng that is Part 95 type accepted, has a sticker and everything, I think they have on there, you are allowed to use that on the FRS and GMRS frequencies, and you're allowed to use it on the amateur radio frequencies, I think is what she was saying.
Not what I read. Okay. Go ahead.
But if you modify it so it goes to amateur radio, then it loses its type acceptance, and then you can't use it on any frequencies. I think is what she was. I could pull it up. I guess I posted it in the thing.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one of those things where like a radio with a keypad that's legal on one band, if you switched it to the other band and it was type accepted, the keypad would be disabled by firmware settings or something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, or if you did anything electrically to it, right? If you opened it up and put a resistor or took one out or something like that.
Yeah, so a good example is that radio that you were just playing with, Ape, where it was a
Yeah.
GMRS radio and you give it the 3-finger salute and it turns into a ham radio. So the
Right.
radio itself is type accepted for both, but the model number discerns which one it is you have in your hands. So
Yes, I would just wonder what it was. And I know a lot of the radio, since 2018, a lot of the radio companies, well, let's talk about Chirp for a second. So Chirp has made it so that your Baofeng, if you program it with their software, it removes the ability to transmit on FRS and GMRS frequencies. So in certain communities, old versions of Chirp are very popular. Like if you have the old binaries for that, because it didn't have that restriction. And I believe Anytone /BTEX/Alinco, they all have the same radio they put out. They changed their firmware as well, where it used to be full open, and now it's not when you program it.
The thing I was asking about, and this I want to share this up for Tony. And this, I cannot find the article I was reading yesterday. I've been looking for it. I can't find it. It's disappeared off the internet. The man is out to get me. But it referred to Part 90. What did I do?
wow, it's like I'm playing cards with my brother's kids.
My
I know,
I swear.
I clicked the wrong thing. Just hold your water.
You did the
and-
triple double click or something.
I
don't
did
know.
the triple. Yes, I did the triple double.
Ape, I've been telling you, we can't get there with this equipment.
I'm with you.
Okay, I'm not touching nothing now. I'm just no touching.
Promise.
So they were talking in this article that I read, and it was a back and forth, and I wish I could find the stinking article. It was a back
what's
and
it about?
forth between the FCC lawyer, an FCC mouthpiece, an official FCC person, and I want to say an ARRL person. And they were talking about this, and this is what came out of it that I got out of this piece where they were talking about it, because the FCC has kind of changed their tune on this apparently. And what this says to me, and I'm not challenging anything, I'm just asking the question here. That says to me that if I have a GMRS certified radio, I can't modify it to use it on anything else, and that if it's equipped with a frequency capability that's not listed in Part 95, then it's not legal to use.
Yeah, I think that's. I've read this twice through now, and it's written in government speak. So
Yes, sir.
You got to go through
Right.
it fairly carefully and parse it carefully. But they're saying, I guess, first that it's not going to be certified. So this is sort of directed at the manufacturer. If you can use it on another radio service, for which certification is also required. And so if it will do FRS and GMRS, as almost all GMRS radios will do, that's okay. But you can't modify it to be used on on amateur radio frequencies. And if you do that, then it's
Right.
unlawful.
You broke it. It's no good to you, right? And that was the thing I was trying to understand. So if you have a Baofeng that, I mean, the UV5R, what do they sell that as? Do they even sell that as Part 95?
No.
No, it's sold as Part 97 as a ham radio.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be explicitly said as a ham radio. So that's what got folks in trouble like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Was that they were selling them as GMRS or FRS radios, or even the NASCAR frequencies, whatever those are, like 150 something. And they did not have any FCC type acceptance for those radios. Now, like I did a video like 5 years ago where I was showing Baofengs, and like some of them had fake Part 90 stickers on there, and like the one said for sale on YouTube or for sale on eBay or Amazon.
Nice.
Like on the certification sticker.
No, the sticker itself.
So, and my question about the Baofeng, so they're selling that as an amateur radio under Part 97. And this is why I was trying to find that article, because she talks about this in there. What I got out of that article was that, so something like a Baofeng, which is getting sold as a Part 97 radio now, if it transmits on some other service, that's a no-no as well. So this works both ways. And it was kind of a little bit of conflicting information from Part 95 and Part 97. And I wish I had kept the article. I thought I saved it, but I didn't.
And basically this also says you can't program the radio from the front panel to go into a GMRS service.
Right.
So using my UV5R on GMRS is bad.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, what's the likelihood you're going to get caught if you do?
Right.
Fairly small, but again, is it worth your ham license to play that? I don't think so.
Well, no. Right. I mean, it's like you said, Anthony, there's not a squad of radio trucks out driving around South Alabama looking for me.
Yet.
Know of.
That I know
There will
of.
be now.
I mean, theoretically. Okay, theoretically.
Theoretically, there you go.
They're really good at it.
Actually, I've never done that because there ain't no GMRS around here. The only time there's GMRS around where I live is if I key up a GMRS radio. That's it.
Same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly the situation. I have a house down in Florida, and close to the beach, you can hear GMRS stuff all the time, and it's basically people yelling at their kids to get back there. You know?
Yeah. Right.
Get away from the water.
I don't know if they're using FRS or GMRS, but we have construction companies, like street construction companies. Like it's the interstate up here. They're doing work on. They're talking on GMRS all day.
Oh yeah.
And they say all kind of stuff they ain't supposed to be saying too.
Jason has found the legal loophole that we've all been looking for. What I'm hearing is we need justification to buy more radios because I need service-specific radios. I'm going to take this info to the wife. And Jason, what I will tell you is this is legal precedent here. You do not need to take this to your wife.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The law says you must have one radio for each service, and that's just the law. I mean, there's no debate. It just is.
I mean, you don't have to ask her if you can drive the car without your license or you have to follow the speed limit. It's just law.
It's just what we do.
And you need one
Declare
for each
yourself the
band.
minister of finance and just go get it.
Right. There you go.
So, Tony, you sent me over a couple more documents. I'm going to share out this one here, see if that rings any bells with you.
Yeah, that's the Hobby King case I was talking about earlier, where they were marketing these radios. Let's see if I can find that one. Probably not, because I don't think I put it up here. But basically, they were selling these radios, and they hadn't gotten them type accepted, and they got this cease and desist order, and the government then later on came in and assessed forfeiture against them for having done this. And I don't know whether the guy wrote back and said, hey, we're a small company. We're just, we're gonna go out of business if, we can't sell these radios, and apparently we can't sell these radios. And so I guess Hobby King, I think it may have had something to do. It says it's in the 2.4 gigahertz band, I think is where the radios were.
They sell
that's kind
RC
of a publicly
aircraft
available band as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Hobby King sells drones and RC stuff.
They do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got into quite a pickle with the FCC over it. And
So were they selling this as a completed radio or as a kit that you build yourself?
I believe it was the RF component to a kit you build, but I'm not certain of that because it was just the radio part that they were looking at for the FCC.
Because there's a super cheap radio called the Pixie, and it's like, anywhere from $7 to $15. It's a little kit you can build in an afternoon, and it is extremely dirty. And you can then work your way up the ladder of building bandpass filters and cleaning it up yourself as part of your learning experience. But they sell those things all day long.
Yeah. Well, they're not selling a completed radio. They're selling a kit.
Yeah, you can make that yourself legally, right?
Right. As a ham, you have that authorization. You can, make your own radios. Because I think, one of the things that makes the service unique is that we've always had the ability to do that. As hams, we've always had the ability to build our own radios. Now, most of us would prefer to go down to Ham Radio Outlet or Gigaparts and buy them, but we've had the ability to do that. Now, of course, in my case, I can't do that without burning down the house and causing self-injury with the soldering iron, but technically I have that ability.
I hate it when I leave mine on for like overnight. The soldering iron.
That's why I have a battery operated one.
And maybe we covered this, and I just want to. So, if I have a radio that is not certified as GMRS, and it's a ham radio, so let's pick on Baofeng because Baofeng. It's not legal for me to use it on GMRS frequencies. That's our understanding of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Correct.
Even though the radio will jump to that frequency just fine. Okay.
Yeah, and it will.
Right.
I had one of the old Baofengs, one of the ones that were pre-band radios. I wound up giving it away to a local ham club, for somebody who was a new ham to use. And one of the reasons I did that is because I had set it up to monitor the police and fire jurisdictions. And I had those frequencies on there, and I always assumed that, it would never key up on those frequencies, and I accidentally keyed up on the police frequency. Fortunately, I did not give out my call sign. Allegedly did that. And
right.
So I decided after that I did not need to have that Baofeng because I have no desire to get crosswise either with the local police or the FCC.
Right. Well,
So,
it's not just, we're picking on Baofengs here, but there's a whole lot of those Chinese radios that will do that.
Yes, there are.
And I'm not talking some low budget $25 fangs either. I'm talking.
I got quiet all of a sudden.
The Steve, the B-Tech transmits out of ham band all day.
The 6x2?
Yes.
Well,
I haven't tried it.
It depends on the firmware that you have on there, and then also you can. I believe there's 10 different. I think they call it regionalization that you can do in the firmware that will get you in a band, out of band, or a different regions band, like an ITU 1 or 3.
I didn't change anything. Mine, I don't know. Mine from the store will transmit on public safety.
Have you ever done a firmware upgrade on it?
I mean, from 2.03 to 2.04. I ain't done no fancy firmware upgrade. And it absolutely transmits on 453.
Yeah, I believe you. I believe you because when I got mine, it was wide open. But there's a piece of software that you can change all that.
Now, I mean, I can go in and since I'm out of the fire business now, because I had it when I was still active, but I turned off the let me transmit button so I don't accidentally do anything stupid.
Because you're a good ham.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to not embarrass myself in front of the entire county. I do it enough with you people, but yeah.
Like that time at Huntsville when you were transmitting APRS on the wrong frequency all day long?
Really? Just
You started
that.
What about when he put the country code for Singapore or whatever in the Toad's the ToadNet thing? Like what happened there? You were broadcasting DMR to the whole country of Singapore. Is that what happened?
It was an unused channel. No, they have
just
the
ones with
DMR
radios.
IDs. They have the DMR IDs segregated with different countries. Nobody was using the frequency. It didn't hurt anyone. No one knew it. It wasn't even a frequency. It was a talk group number. And the Brandmeister people were butthurt, and that was it. So what are you doing? So I'm trying to get a DMR ID, jerk.
The Brandmeister boys get upset fast over certain things.
They do, and in the end, they don't hand out talk group numbers anymore for American talk groups. for whatever reason.
Yeah,
And
they're
we
like,
found
use
the
your,
loophole.
use your own.
Yep.
Create a club call
So-
and then use the club call as your group.
Which
call.
is what we did, which was a get around from the beginning. But I thought, well, that's kind of sketchy. We need a regular.
Seems like the
call.
wrong way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it works. Jim, do you have one of those mugs handy? One of those tumblers?
I've been drinking tea out of it all morning.
That looked red.
Tea.
Oh, there we go. You had a red one too. Let's embiggen Jim here real quick.
This is my the one my wife got me for Christmas or something.
It's
You
almost
got to
as
drink
good
out of
as,
that.
it's almost as good as the blue one.
And then this is our coffee and ham radios.
Excellent. And where can we get one of those?
Coffeeandhamradios.com.
Excellent.
Thank you, Tan Hat.
We have Tan Hat that just joined as a new YouTube member. Welcome to the membership here. One of the perks you get as a member is next Wednesday, December 7th, we're going to have a members only private chat where you get to talk with us off of YouTube and ask any questions that you might have or share any projects that you're working on. If you would like to be a member of the channel, right below our handsome faces, well, kind of more below Jim's, but we'll just let that one slide. There's a join button that you can click that would get you into those perks, those extra benefits that we have to offer for you. And there's also a private room on the Toads Discord, the friendliest place on the internet this side of QRZ, where we chat all day long.
That's absolutely true. The Toads Discord is awesome.
Just make sure that your food pictures are on point. Otherwise,
8 points gravy.
Right, you got to have the gravy on it. Otherwise, you get in a little trouble.
Don't
Jim
throw no pork chop without gravy.
Jim just did some camera magic. I think it might be because the chat is talking about backwards written letters or something. Jim, you want to show those again real quick?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
I'm gonna call Jenny up.
There you go.
There you go. Awesome.
Don't post dry taters.
That's right.
Joe Brett.
Yeah, we got a couple of really friendly channels on there. We got one called Nom Noms where we all share all of our food that we enjoy all day long, and we kind of have a little cook-off. We had a Thanksgiving cook-off too, and apparently my dessert wasn't appreciated.
Those are your fancy pants. That look like one of those New Orleans cakes or whatever.
It was. My wife decided to make a king cake.
I was like, what's he doing getting a New Orleans cake all the way up there to the northern of the Canadian border?
We're allowed to bake up here in that way. We're not allowed to bake in the other way yet.
It's the only
Lawnmower,
way it's
yes.
got heat in that house.
Yeah.
I don't even know why. I don't even know why in the wintertime he even uses refrigerator. Just put it outside in the box.
I do. Actually, we put it outside in the refrigerator to keep it warm.
Or freezer. Yeah.
You got to bring it above zero. To use it as an insulator. Put a light bulb in it or something. It is cold up here. So we got another legal brief that you had shared with us, Tony. This one here was certified mail, return receipt requested. What's this one about?
This is a warning notice, and this is what the commission does when they essentially believe that you are screwing up and they want you to stop. I think you get these when there is at least some assumption you might be doing something without intent. But in this case, it was a guy who was talking over two people on the 7.2 frequency, 7200.
7200.
And it says that the people from the commission used RDF to find the location, and then they recorded the incident in question. And you can have a copy of the recording if you want one. This is one of those letters that you get that says, look, we're sending you this notice. A warning notice is not the same as a notice of violation. This is just a warning. Okay. And it says, if you keep this up, you can get a fine between $7,500 and $10,000. I think this is from 2018, so that's gone up. I think now the upward range is maybe $18,000. But the fines can be quite significant. A lot of times you just get slapped on the wrist with $1,000, but I don't think I would want to part with $1,000. So, but they said it was malicious interference and he had to stop. If you get a notice like this and you keep doing it, you're going to get a notice of violation and then you're going to get a forfeiture order.
So this is the shot across the bow The notice of violation is amidships.
Yes. Yeah, the notice of violation is a direct hit.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is actually pretty interesting. I'm reading this. Let me take a moment to read this because it's tiny text on my screen too. It says on March 6th, 2018, you were heard by staff at the Commission's High Frequency Direction Finding Center, the HFDF, using long-range direction finding techniques, deliberately taking over an ongoing QSO between two other amateurs while operating on the frequency of 7200 kilohertz. They wanted to make sure they're very proud of that HFDF that they have. The commission employee used direction finding equipment and confirmed the transmissions were coming from your location. The employee recorded the offending transmissions and provided undersigned counsel with recordings of the incident in question. Should you desire a copy of the recording, one will be made available to you. Your operation, as described above, is contrary to the basis and purpose of the amateur radio service as set out in Part 97.1 and is a violation of 97.101D of the Commission's rules. 97.101D states that no amateur operator shall willfully and maliciously interfere with or cause interference to any radio communication. Please be advised that Commission expects you to abide by its rules. So this is actually really interesting because if you guys have ever tuned up to 7200, it's a dumpster fire. It's pretty bad. And so I guess that this person was on that frequency but did not identify, so they had to use the direction finding to figure out where they were, and then they kind of just assumed it was him. So that would be kind of interesting. Since this is a warning, there's no reason to fight it, I guess. I mean, how does this look on your permanent record?
Oh.
Well, I'm not sure it goes on your permanent record. I mean, obviously, this was filed and it's publicly available on the FCC website. So anybody who wants to can find this and pull it off and put it on YouTube and talk about it, So, I mean, reputationally, I think it probably causes you a little bit of injury. But in terms of your license, I don't think there's any requirement that you have to, notify the FCC when you go to renew it. So there's that part of it.
That was pretty interesting that they were able to use some direction finding from their location and figure out where you were. Yeah, Chuck, we can't mention that on stream.
Well, you need to triangulate and all that stuff too, right? So they're probably using headquartered at their location, but they've got to be using receivers in other places.
Yeah, they would have to.
Well, in order to direction find, don't you need more than one source of truth?
That's what I'm saying. You need a triangulation at a minimum.
Yeah.
The more plots, the better.
Yeah.
Right.
So
military
as a public service announcement, real quick, Tony, Uber Geek, our friend, dropped a hint in the chat. Please don't search for that term that he's got in quotes there on Google. You will not be happy with the results.
Yeah.
It's funny. Don't get me wrong, but don't search for it.
There is the military uses something that we used to call the elephant cage, and it's an HFDF series of antennas that are all in a big circle, and they tune to, two of those that are offset, and they can get at least one azimuth from that, and then there are multiple locations throughout the world, so they can pretty much figure out where any radio communication is coming from, and. I'm assuming that the FCC has similar or better equipment themselves, and probably in multiple locations. Yeah. But I have to admit, you guys you have sort of wounded me in that you haven't asked me about my favorite lawyer joke yet.
Lay it out. Lay it out.
Okay, so I would point out that I used to work for a guy who you could tell the funniest lawyer joke to, and he'd just sit there stone-faced saying that it caused great injury to the profession. I think that's nonsense. But there's a story of a medical malpractice lawyer who was just awful. I mean, he would do terrible things, like when he was trying a case against a doctor who just made a mistake, he would hire actors to come in, and while the plaintiff was on the stand crying through their testimony about the terrible thing that happened to him, they would sit on the defense side and laugh and point at the guy who was, on the stand crying, and the guy'd get huge verdicts, and every doctor in the entire county hated this guy. But then he developed a brain tumor. And so he had to go get that worked on. And there was one neurosurgeon who was willing to take the case. And he took the case. And about 3 weeks after the surgery, he got a letter. And, he opened it up, and was afraid to read it. But he said the letter said, for the last year I have been in intense pain. I have had nothing but trouble and turmoil, agony, sheer torture over the last year. But with your surgical skill, you ended that. I can't thank you enough. And it was signed by the tumor.
Nice. So now everybody's sharing their favorite lawyer jokes in the chat
Right,
too.
I know.
So
There you go. Yeah.
if you weren't properly offended before, prepare.
Well, Tony will tell you if you've ever been in the EM, and Chuck will too. If you ever been in EMS or fire business, it's nothing but nonstop inappropriate humor
Yes, exactly.
Pretty much.
all day,
How you deal
all
with-
the time.
It's how you deal with the trauma.
That's right. NC-17 at best.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I used to tell the chief all the time. He didn't buy it, though. I don't know.
So we got another brief that you had sent over. I guess, is brief the right word for these? This is another warning notice.
These are just warning notices. A brief is something that is compiled by a lawyer and filed. Lawyers are the only people in the world who will send something of 118 pages and call it a brief.
Right.
Yeah, really brief.
We call that an opus.
But this is another one of these deliberate complaints. This is on a VHF or UHF repeater. And the guy's just keying up and sending DTMF tones to shut down the repeater, which then I guess people have to turn back on using similar remote codes. But the FCC got these complaints and they investigated, and they sent the guy a notice telling him that he needed to stop. And that's essentially all this is. He, in addition to doing this, it says he used false call signs, and that will certainly cause the FCC to be upset with you if you do that. I think a lot of times when the commission gets these kind of complaints, they regard it in some ways as people not being able to solve their own problems. And so they'll send out a warning notice the first time, and then they only get involved to do a notice of apparent liability or notice of violation if it continues and if you don't get, they don't fix the problems. And in this situation, I didn't find anything else for this particular amateur when I was looking through the FCC's Enforcement Bureau operations. And so hopefully this guy got the message and stopped doing this. But it happens a lot. And all of this stuff is out there and freely available on the internet. There's a page on the FCC website that if you are really determined, you can find, because there's almost no organization or plan for the FCC's website. It looks like it was put together by a Cub Scout
Amen.
group on meth.
In 1997.
Yes, exactly.
Well, the
Please,
GeoCities
front
people need to
page,
have
man.
gainful employment still.
So
this is
that's,
interesting. So if you guys have never operated or maintained a repeater, you can give it DTMF tones. If you send it, I don't know, I'm going to make this up, star 793556,
try
it'll
that
shut the
right now.
repeater off. And if you send it star 793557, it'll ask you to input the time, or so like twice a year you have to change the clock on the repeater so it properly identifies the time as necessary. And somebody's got to do that. And rather than drive to the repeater site twice a year, you can do it remotely, which is pretty neat. But one of the other things about ham radio is that we're extremely limited in the type of messages that we can send over the airwaves. And so I can't encrypt that traffic to keep bad actors like this out. And so they can do it. And when I do key up to talk to the repeater, it repeats my DTMF tones out. So you hear the codes that I send. Fun stuff.
Right.
Well, the thing is that most repeaters probably have a default DTMF tone code set built into
from the
the
factory.
out-of-the-box configuration. That's probably publicly available on the internet, and you could get that. Now, I know that you can toggle on your PL tones on and off with DTMF tones. I don't know if you... Well, like we have a local repeater that turns off the PL tones for a traffic net. So at the beginning, the guy comes on and he turns them off, and at the end of the net, he turns them right back on. I don't know if you can change your PL tone with DTMF, but you could certainly do that and cause a tremendous amount of
Oh,
disruption.
that would be a pain. Yeah.
And you can't,
Yeah.
you cannot hide the PL tones. I mean, all that stuff goes over the air. The DTMF
Yeah, you can just scan
tones,
for
I
'em.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And there are a number of scanners and programs that will tell you what numbers were pressed
Yeah.
for DTMF. So it's not like it's some secret code that, it's going
Well, it's
over
the same
air,
thing as a
everybody
touch
can hear
tone.
it.
It's like
Yeah.
a touch tone phone.
Yes,
back in
that's
the day.
exactly what it is. It's exactly the same thing.
It's like dial tone modulation frequency or something like that.
Dual tone,
Dual tone.
dual tone multi-frequency.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have repeaters here that'll tell you what your signal strength is to them if you punch in
If you
the
ask them
code.
nicely. And that's how you work with
somehow.
All-Star also. That's how you change channels on an All-Star node.
Yeah. So
So we got another
Fred
one
just
for
put
you.
it up there. That's funny. Fred just put that what I was talking
this
about
is-
up there.
This is the gal I was talking about earlier who, she was upset because in the email you admit to interfering with other amateurs, but argue that you were being constantly disrespected due to your androgynous voice. You further claim that you are not guilty of interference with the cause because members of the net were trying to humiliate you by referring to you with masculine pronouns.
butthurt alert.
Yeah, Michelle must not sound exactly like it. Probably sounds more like Michael. I don't know, but she was.
That's okay.
butthurt because they were doing that, and she thought that gave her a license to just interfere willy nilly with other people. So she got this warning notice. I did.
So
not
Michelle's
look
name was really
for-
Karen.
Yeah, should have been Karen exactly. But I didn't look further to see if she wound up getting a notice of liability or not. But I strongly suspect if she continued, she did. The auxiliary communications service provided them with a recording, and also they got affidavits from the scribe for the net and the net control, and it made it clear that it had a public safety impact. It says. Mr. Gregg in his affidavit notes that your on-air behavior created a public safety hazard because of the use of repeater by priority traffic would have been limited. So they cited her for amateur no amateur shall willfully or maliciously interfere or cause interference to any radio communications or signals, and that's what she did. And again, this is just a warning notice. This is a slap on the wrist, or maybe better accurately said, as a slap upside the head to say, straighten up and fly right.
I didn't know that nets had scribes. We need a scribe.
We need a net first.
Okay.
What else we got?
I think that'd be an interesting project. I'm kind of intrigued with the whole idea of the virtual ham radio club.
We have one.
You're a member.
And you're a
Yeah.
member, actually. Kilo
That's right.
Tango Zero Alpha Delta Sierra, K-Toads, the Toads Radio Club.
Or if Ape says it, it's Kazakhstan, Tajikistan,
Taipei.
Taipei.
I just want to use phonetics that help people understand exactly what we're trying to convey.
Exactly. All right, so we got another one for you. Warning for unlicensed radio operation.
Oh yeah, this is back in the era of Smokey and the Bandit. Everybody decided after watching that movie that they needed to sound like they were operating from a tar paper shack outside of Tulsa, and bought a CB radio and
Don't be calling out Joe Brett.
and changed their handles to ridiculous things, and of course everybody at the time was just absolutely ensured that the FCC was coming to hunt them down for not having a license, because at the time you had to have a license for a CB radio. You don't anymore. But the one way you can get into trouble with a CB is to use excessive power levels, and that's what this person did. They used a linear amplifier, and they were able to locate it. And I forget whether this is where they actually went to the house, but they told him that use of the non-certified transmitter or power amplifier voids your authority to operate the station. So this was a warning for unlicensed radio operation, but it could certainly be followed by a notice of apparent liability if the guy continues. And this was the CB radio. Again, I think where you tend to get into trouble with stuff like this is by causing spurious emissions on ham bands and hams contacting the FCC and saying, hey, we got somebody who's not playing by the rules.
Does the CB crowd 8 probably knows this, because you're kind of into CB, aren't you? Not that you're a master criminal or nothing. That's not what I meant. I mean, those charges were never proven. But is the CB community still running a lot of illegal amplifiers like they used to in the 70s and 80s?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like every...
they were more than 1,500 watts a lot of times.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
And I got to tell you, everybody thinks it's just a bunch of Yahoo rednecks. They have some of the most sophisticated electronic amplification systems in cars that I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there's shame some of the ham installations, most of the ham installations I've seen.
When your car has 4 alternators.
I haven't had a
Right.
CB on the air since Carter got kicked out of office. That was the last time I had a CB on was 1979 or 80.
I had one in the Jeep and took it out a little while ago. I keep saying I'm going to put it back in there, but I just haven't done it.
But you're not.
I keep one
It's
for
not,
off-road
no.
because still, when you go out with other people that have, 4-wheel drives and stuff, still it's pretty much CB is their go-to a lot of times. So I keep
the thing
one
is
just so
you no
can,
license,
so I can.
right?
All right.
And you could drive up to Walmart and get yourself a CB.
But my buddy that's a ham, we can talk about the other guys on 2 meter. So did you see what he just did?
Nice.
They sell. I have 3 truck stops right down the road from me at the interstate, and every one of them sells a whole ton of CB gear. I mean, they got a glass case electronics section, looks like Walmart in there or something.
The bad part about CB gear is that it hasn't improved. Really, I mean, there are some pretty good stuff out there, but like your regular Cobras and stuff really aren't better than the old ones. You want
And
a
apparently there's some
Malaysia
money
Cobra.
in CB too. So like,
there
I don't
is.
know, I don't know why they don't put out a nice CB, 11-meter radio with a waterfall display and all kinds of other stuff like that. They just don't.
The
From what I
Yaesu
see.
CB.
But it drives the cost of them up tremendously. And so if you watch some of the CB channels on YouTube, a lot of them are using the 7300 to monitor other people's signals. I've actually even seen some of these guys with flexes, so they can argue with each other about saying, hey, you got a splatter box going on over there, boy, all that stuff. But it's a funny subculture. I like it.
Yeah,
All right. So this one, go ahead.
I just said it is that. It is a funny culture.
Yeah. All right. So this one here is another one from the FCC. This looks more like a notice of violation. I can read the text on the screen there, so I sound official. But tell us about this one.
Yeah, this is the most recent one. It came out in June of this year, and it's a notice of violation issued pursuant to the rules, and it's sent to this David Dean, who is in Centennial, Colorado. And basically, he was sending out a continuous tone carrier on 7.033, and apparently was doing so to deprive other people of the frequency. I don't know. But the agent monitoring the signal broadcasting from the residents in Fairplay, Colorado, and observed the following violations. And then it lists the 47 CFR 97, Part 97 violations, because they didn't have a control operator. The guy wasn't home at the time, and he just continually had this tone carrier going out. And it didn't appear to be something that was unintentional. It appeared to be an intentional violation. So they sent him this notice of violation. He would need to respond to this, and then the commission would determine what action to take based on the notice of violation. This is not a warning notice. This is this is the second step in the process, notice of violation. And then if he didn't somehow explain his behavior, he's going to get a notice of apparent liability, which he also will have to respond to. And then the next step, of course, would be a forfeiture order.
So you could get out of this potentially if you're not a jerk, right?
Right. This is where you hire the attorney, and the attorney comes in and says, it may not have appeared that so-and-so was home, but, actually he was down in the basement and was in the bathroom with, spastic diarrhea or something.
I hate it when that happens. We had a super chat pop up a second ago.
We did
Mr.
from
Ryan
Ryan Haynes.
Haynes.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And then we had a complaint. Somebody filed a warning.
Sorry. Gotta dance. Gotta dance.
TC Fitz also.
He needs some milk.
Yeah, and we also had
Looks
a
like
channel
Dancing's
member.
here to stay.
What was the
TC
complaint?
Fitz.
Oh, the complaint that was we weren't dancing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
Thank you,
Tan.
Tan.
That was for you too,
thank
brother.
you, Tan. I got to call him.
All right, so let's get rid of this one here. See what else we got. That's the wrong button.
What are we doing? Oh, there we go.
Oh, I'm bringing up another file to share.
Oh, okay.
These all have like the same file name though, so
Yeah, they're really strange in that way.
Oh,
this is
like
the last
getting
one I
your-
got.
it's like a GMRS license, right?
This looks like it's the same one. Is this the same one? No.
No, this is the second one. Notice of violation. This is November 16th, 2022. And it's to the same guy, David Dean from Centennial, Colorado. And it says, Commission received a complaint from the state of Colorado alleging that someone had illegally cloned a radio ID that was transmitting on the state's digital tracked radio system
Oh, jeez, what a dork.
without authorization. The complaint was referred to the Enforcement Bureau's Denver office. During the investigation, Dean provided a handheld radio, a Motorola XTS 2500, that when, I guess, can't read that word, paged by a representative of the state of Colorado, responded to the ping indicating that the radio in Dean's possession was the cloned radio. The agents observed the following violation. Stations in the wireless radio service must be used and operated only in accordance with the rules applicable to their particular service. So basically, the guy had I guess a DMR radio that he was using to monitor the state of Colorado.
P25 probably. Yeah.
And you can't do that. No can do. A lot of those are encrypted, and they don't want you listening to it. And for good reason. A lot of times, particularly in the medical service, there's HIPAA violations that occur when private medical information gets sent over the air and anybody can listen to it.
Right.
So I don't know what the rest of this says, but if I got this notice of violation, I would be pretty concerned that a notice of apparent liability was going to follow, because he was just cited in June for that 7.033 problem.
That's crazy.
I'll be right back. I believe we've had an incident here.
Oh, stay safe.
At the house?
He's gone.
You never
Okay.
seen him move that fast before.
I know. Takes
I
a
think
lot
that
to
was
get
the
him
cookies.
motivated.
The cookies came out of the oven.
Right. He's like Pavlov's dog right there, man. What's that?
Yes.
Is that chocolate chip? Smells some Toll House. Oh, Thump's here. What is Thump doing? Thump's bringing trouble to the stream. Welcome, Thump.
Yeah, good morning.
Better
Doc.
late than
We
never, he said.
must have woke him up.
Ah, man, stream looks so much better now that Jim's gone. So, Tony, I put some contact information for you down in the description of this video. You've got a YouTube channel called JD, A Lawyer Explains. And
Yes, I
then
do.
I've got a link to Concealed Carry Magazine, where you are a regular contributor. And then you published a book that you put out on Amazon. Tell us about your book.
Oh, well, when I first started with POTA, I kept making these mistakes. I guess it's probably close to a year ago. Ham Radio Dude did this video about the mistakes that he made in getting ready to go on a POTA adventure. And I thought, holy cow, he's talking about my life. And so I think a lot of times when I have a problem like that, I just figure out a way to avoid it. And I started looking at things like, if I'm going to do a park that I've never been to, I get the Google Maps and do the satellite view so I can figure out where I want to operate from. And I put together all these little tips, and I thought, well, maybe somebody else would benefit from it. So I did the Pocket Guide to Parks on the Air, and it's on Amazon. And I'm probably going to update it because there was this famous YouTube star whose ham radio call sign I got wrong in the first edition. And it turns out that the call sign K9MG was actually a deceased person, and it was KM9G that I wanted to put on there. So I did fix that in a later version, but it basically is just a series of ways that you can plan and have a better outcome on Parks on the Air. And that's probably my favorite part of ham radio at this point is Parks on the Air.
Oh yeah.
I like going out to the parks. Recently did Ponce de Leon Springs in Florida, which was fun. A whole bunch of parks in Florida I haven't done. I've done quite a few in Alabama, and then when I went up to Missouri to do for the firm's annual meeting, I did Truman Home and some little place off I-70 that is so important and so memorable that I don't remember the name to it. But I have a lot of fun doing that, and it is amazing to me how quickly the contacts come on POTA. And so what I have started to do now, and I'm going to include as a tip in the next one, I have a GoPro camera that I stick on the window and turn on so that when I miss the call signs, I can pull up the video from that, and I do a paper log because I'm just not coordinated enough, particularly in the car, to use a computer and a ham radio at the same time.
You'll get there.
So if
Chuck can do it,
and as a result, I sometimes call signs wrong. And so all of those tips and stuff were what I put in the book.
When I did my first POTA, it was like hard to get contacts. It's a few years ago, and the last few times, like you get out there and just one person spots you. I mean, if you can get one person to spot you, if you don't have service, it just totally changes your contacts usually. Mm-hmm. And now, but you can call CQ all day long, just CQ, and nobody will answer you. As soon as you put POTA or SOTA behind it, you got everybody wanting to talk to you. Sometimes,
it's rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My first one, man, I struggled, and I didn't know, kind of like probably your book there or your note thing. I didn't realize you could actually. I made contacts with other people, but I didn't know that was actually legal for your contacts. I didn't know you could hunt yourself also. Hunt other people.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I found out the day after.
It's actually a pro tip when you're doing QRP operations on POTA. Sometimes you can't call CQ because you just don't have a strong enough signal to break through. So then you just go and you hunt. You make 10 park-to-park contacts, and you get twice the points, and you get the park activated, and you have fun.
All right.
Good advice. And I don't do QRP very often. The first time
is too short.
I did QRP, and it didn't work. So, but I was using a Zygu 5105, and that may have had a lot to do with it.
Brother, that was my QRP experience was with the 5105, and I'm like, this is the most frustrating thing I've ever done.
I think now, SOTA. I think if you use SOTA, I know SOTA is a little bit. To me, you only need 4 contacts, so you don't need a bunch. But I did QRP SOTA. I've done better on QRP SOTA than I have POTA.
Height is
for
might.
some reason. I don't know. Maybe that's it.
I haven't heard anything about the Ham Radio Parity Act. So as far as I know, it has not made it through Congress. There is a problem with this kind of legislation in that it's hard to push and particularly when you're pushing up against HOA rules and that kind of thing, there are a lot of very powerful lobbyists who try and shut that down. And boy, that's a good question too. DMCA violation notices. I've never talked to anybody who's had that issue come up, but it certainly could.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where the people who would do the enforcement on that aren't really paying attention to SSTV. So it might not be necessarily legal, but it's passable because nobody cares to enforce it.
So we could create a system to download MP3s over SSTV frequencies.
Oh, wow. Could you imagine how long it would take to get a 3 megabyte
Right.
MP3 file over SSTV at 8 baud?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So Marvin's asking, what is the DMCA? DMCA is the copyright protection thing for, major manufacturers of, movies, TV shows, music, etc. So if I was to play "All I Want for Christmas" by Mariah Carey over ham radio bands, not only would I be in violation,
cap you.
Yeah, not only would I be in violation of FCC rules of what I can and cannot transmit with my license privileges, but also I would be broadcasting copyrighted material without paying appropriate royalties to Mariah Carey, and Miss Carey's legal team would send me a cease and desist order, then a warning. Well, the warning, then a cease and desist, then a notice of then and it would just go all sideways.
And that's a violation of man code. Listen to that song too.
It is.
Right? You'd be
we wouldn't clip your card. We just tear it in half and revoke it. Right. I would be more scared of violating Disney's copyright because they got lawyers.
The force is strong with that one. Yes.
Right.
Not only Disney, but there are law firms out there that are basically copyright trolls.
Yes, there are. A personal experience with one.
Well, I have a friend who is with the Wisconsin Society for Respiratory Care.
The worst.
And they had a seminar, and they had a presenter from out of state who came and did a presentation on vaping. And in that vaping presentation, he had a picture of a guy who was vaping. The picture was copyrighted, and the copyright trolls basically sent them a letter demanding $1,500 for the use of that picture during both the presentation and when they later put it up on their network or on their YouTube, their website for people to download the presentation.
Getty Images.
They had to pay it.
Was it a Getty Images?
Getty Images, yes.
Yes.
Nice.
So, Tony, that's a very good yes. I mean, they're wicked evil. We plotted to create a website for the fire department. And so I had a friend of mine who does the media stuff at work do the website because I don't do websites. And she went to some website called freewebpictures.com/ we're not really in China, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and downloaded some generic clip art off their website, fireman stuff. And we got
material.
We got a letter from Getty Images that we had violated their copyright, and they wanted $2,500 for each image that was on our website. And, or else, yes. And they said, and this is a strict liability thing, and you can fight this, but you're going to have to pay for it anyway. So don't even try. Just send us a check. I mean, that was the gist of their letter. I've got a copy of it around here somewhere still. And so me being me, I said, hello, we're a very poor volunteer fire department, and I know it's strict liability and that I'm guilty because I sinned, but can you let us off? Otherwise, we'll have to get an attorney because legally in the state of Alabama, a corporation that's a public safety, blah, 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 can't roll over, blah, blah, blah. And they sent us a letter back and said, never mind.
Our lawyers are bigger than your lawyers.
I just bullshitted straight up.
You're good at that.
Well,
I Googled a little bit, but it was mostly bullshit.
What's interesting about it is that it was probably also fair use because, you weren't using it for
no money
gain.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that's how I was able to get the fine knocked down in the Wisconsin case. But the real problem with these people is it's going to cost you money. In that case, I couldn't go up to Wisconsin and represent them, the Wisconsin Society, even though I would have loved to, because I would have had to hire a local lawyer to get me in pro hoc vice. And there's absolutely no way that they could have won that case because it was clearly fair use. But that didn't matter to them. It was just basically a ticket to get free money.
And my understanding is that firm, and I cannot remember the firm name or I would drop it right now, is Getty's professional copyright troll firm.
Yeah, they're their own shark cage.
Yeah.
So Chris has a question for us, KI7JOM. I live in a two-party state, which is kind of an interesting legal term, where it's against the law to record audio without consent from both parties, which is the definition of two-party state. Does this affect my use of audio recorders for Soda Poda? I have an answer, but I'm going to kick this one over to Tony first.
Well, I believe that when you're transmitting over the air, that's different than being on a phone. And generally speaking, the two-party rules deal with telecommunications that are presumed to be private. Right. So if somebody calls me and wants to talk on a telephone, I'm going to presume that conversation is just between the two of us, not in the whole world. I can't make that presumption when I'm talking on 14.195. I have to assume that anybody with a radio can listen to us. So I don't believe you need to get the consent. And it would be very ungainly to do that. And even if somebody did object to that, the likelihood that it could be enforced against you is minimal, if at all.
Now, to take that question a little farther, I've seen a video or two on YouTube where it was a digital voice video or something with Pi-Star. And he was making contacts and he told them, hey, I'm going to do this on YouTube. Same kind of thing applies, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's still, there's no expectation of privacy, whether it's a digital voice contact or not, or saving the QSO and playing it on YouTube. That doesn't really change anything, right? Because of that lack of expectation of privacy.
Now, a lot of times people ask the question of whether or not, if you have a monetized channel, whether or not that's proprietary gain. And I don't really think that it is, because you're not doing the radio part of it for proprietary gain. You're not selling anything over the radio.
Right.
You're simply recording something and then playing it on your YouTube channel, which is then monetized. But there's too much attenuation between the act of the ham radio conversation and the money that might come or could come later on. And I think it'd be really hard to tie it to a specific amount and to prove it up in court, which they'd have to do.
Right. Yeah, the whole pecuniary interest thing gets a little weird in people's head. They get wrapped around the axle. You can't make money on ham radio. That's true, but what they're really trying to say, I guess the analogy, and it's not a perfect analogy, but the analogy is, I can't call CQ Domino's, order a large pepperoni pizza, give them my credit card number over the airwaves, and then have the pizza show up. That would be making a transaction over ham radio bands. Domino's got paid for that.
And I think that's right as to Domino's. It's not right as to the person ordering the pizza. The interesting thing from my point of view is that if you look generally at what the ham radio community on YouTube has done, what they've done is they've made ham radio accessible for a much wider group of people than would otherwise have been the case. And I think they're expanding the hobby, which I think is ultimately a good thing, and especially that they're getting in newer and younger blood into the hobby.
Yeah, for sure.
And so when you look at what point, the proprietary interest rule is there to protect the purity of ham radio as just hobby, as opposed to, a business or money-making entity. But, I've learned a lot from Steve, a lot of the stuff that you've done. I've done a lot of stuff. I've listened to the Ape and Ham Radio Dude and Josh on Crash Course. I mean, I've personally benefited from that. And I can't imagine that somebody at the FCC is going to say, well, that violates our rules somehow because you're talking about ham radio and you're making money on YouTube.
And they're going to get it.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is, it's kind of a confusing topic. But if you're making money on YouTube, you're not making money on the airwaves.
Right.
Now, the airwaves are a component or a vehicle for that, but it's not the same. When I think about it, I think it's really more around, hey, if I had Ape's Tire Barn just open up and I wanted to sell tires, and I could get on my local net every day and be like, hey, if you use discount code whatever, come to my tire barn and get.
Ape
Like,
tire.
I think that's what we're originally envisioning. What's crazy is that these laws, not just for radio and FCC and ham radio, they were written at a time where you couldn't envision the technology that folks use today, right? And we never go back and catch up. Like, well, we'll put an amendment or a clause or a new interpretation or a document of understanding out where they really just need to go back and revamp the entire, not just Part 97, 90, 95. Because a lot of it's just silly, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, a good analogy on that would be I do not have a commercial driver's license, but I drive my butt to work every day in my car. You know, that's not a pecuniary interest in driving. That's transportation.
Right.
Now,
And that's a good point.
So if you enjoyed today's show, we have another show with Tony coming up on Thursday where we're going to talk about emergency use privileges. We touched about it very briefly today, but we wanted to go more into depth on that case in Oregon and the case of, the wounded officer on the side of the road where you can reach down and pick up their radio and that kind of stuff. And so be sure to be subscribed to the channel. I know most of you already are. You are all awesome, subscribed or not. And we will see you guys on Thursday. Thank you very much, Tony.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Glad to do it.
Very interesting.
And I am
Tony,
clicking
thanks
that
for being
button.
here.
Thanks for
Click.
having me.